it's interesting, and you can do this from the ground up because I've lived it for several years now, and we'll just get rolling. Data is of no use to anyone. It's only once you process that data and you come up with an answer. But first you have to have a really smart question. And a lot of these guys that are Elon Musk, are you guys familiar with that name? SpaceX, Tesla, okay?
And he was the co-founder of PayPal?
He was indeed, right. You know, essentially his opinion is if you ask the really smart question, you're halfway there already, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna ask some of these pros what they do. Guys, if you can read that, can you read that okay? Okay. This will depress Roger a little bit. We have essentially no patents in X. Our primary long-term competition is in China. If we published patents, it would be farcical. I don't use that word too often because the Chinese would just use them as a recipe book. So data can help you and hurt you. Anybody have a guess which company we're looking at?
So it's one of the software?
It's a company you would never imagine they don't have 1,000 patents.
Microsoft?
No brave?
I know they had.
I kind of gave it away.
Oh.
SpaceX. You have to realize he is the first entrance into rockets and space travel, and eventually Mars is his goal, in decades, maybe almost forever. There were essentially the U.S. government and two big, competitors, Lockheed Martin and whoever. No patents, if you can believe that. The guy that's sending stuff to the moon he has no patents. So data or information really is I'm using the term stupid. It doesn't answer any questions, or I guess I should say it doesn't ask any questions, and it's not going to provide answers. You have to have really smart people ask really smart questions based on the needs of a particular market for it to be of any use to you. And we see the terms all the time, big data. We hear about the NSA sniping everybody's phone messages, text messages, email messages, right? Unless you have some programmers that are really smart, writing some very good algorithms, and some people that know exactly what to ask and how to correlate that data, it's of no use to anyone. I'll be real honest with you, even at my scale. There's some smart people out there. 100 years ago, Mr. Einstein, without huge supercomputers, without a calculator, with a chalkboard, created some formulas and some knowledge out there for everyone to use about the entire universe. The old E equals mc squared, right? Energy times mass times a constant squared, which he used the speed of light. He did it without any kind of big data, nothing, right? And so it's not the data, it's someone having a vision of an answer. They need an answer to something, and then they get a hold of the information and process it to create that answer. But the question for us, normally, now for Einstein, it was just solving the mysteries of the universe, easy stuff. For us, that was a little bit of a joke. It didn't work. For us, it's to usually make a profit. Most folks are in business for something. I don't know if I would ever survive just sitting around the university thinking all the time. It would frustrate me to death. It's a lot less stressful. You don't have to worry about making a profit. You don't have to worry about dragging those people to your website, right? But it would drive me crazy to think of all the people that do. I mentioned Elon Musk. I probably couldn't survive a week working for him. It's my understanding his workday is usually 20 hours a week. 20 hours a day, and he expects that of everyone. Same thing with Steve Jobs, if you remember him. I understand that he was very similar. Just to put this in perspective, this is a quote for Albert. I very rarely think in words at all. A thought comes and I may try to express it in words afterwards. He didn't think in big data terms. You have to understand, one of the smartest guys ever born. He thought in visions of what should or could happen, and then proved it mathematically. You know, the kind of math that would kill most of us, right? So you can only imagine. He actually taught, you can only imagine being the new freshman at the university thinking, oh, who do you have for math this semester? Oh, some guy named Einstein. You're pretty well doomed. Data. Start with a market. Do you guys want to mention any business that you're affiliated with? Okay, you don't have to, that's fine. Don't start with data. Start with a market. The tiniest market niche that you can think of, the tiniest market niche that you can completely service with a particular product or service to them, okay? These are some of my people that I really look to for that information, for that advice. The way you break through the mainstream is to target a tiny niche instead of a huge market. And that's from a fellow named Seth Godin. If you guys want to learn about marketing in a non-technical way, Seth Godin, most of the stuff he writes you would really enjoy, and it's very insightful, and it does not require a degree in marketing to understand. Okay? The second part is to start with a problem. Okay? You define your market and then figure out what their biggest problem is that's not being solved before you do any data analysis. Okay? And again, without knowing a particular industry for you, I can't advise you there. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about my industry. I'm directly in the real estate stuff, and I'm trying to do it from an extremely technical view. Are you guys familiar with Zillow? Okay. Their claim to fame is they showed up about 10 years ago out of the blue with what they call an AVM, automated valuation model. That's the old Zestimate. That's where you plug in an address, and their website tells you what they think your house is worth. Sometimes it's pretty good, sometimes it's not so good. But it was enough of a change. Before Zillow showed up, there was only one other place to get a value for your house. You had to call a real estate broker. They came out after dinner. They spent 2 hours with you. They disappeared. They went and did their research the next day. They call you the third day. Say, I've got you a value. And the guy will say, well, tell me. Well, no, I have to show it to you in live. They come back over after dinner, right? So it was this 4 or 5 day process. Zillow found that everybody hated that, and that they could take and through a series of data analysis, big data, if you will, and algorithms, they can give you an estimate of what your home is worth. And we're going to talk about that a little bit because that happens to be what I'm trying to take on, which is, I've been told is absolutely crazy, but I'll tell you why I think it can be done. This last quote is from Mr. Thiel, and if you can identify a delusional popular belief, you can find what lies hidden behind it, the contrarian truth. This is really important to helping you discover your market's problem. You have to define your market, you have to define their problem, and then you can discover a truth that nobody else really believes. And when Zillow hit the market 10 years ago, there wasn't a broker on the planet that believed that anybody, a licensed broker, could give a value. Okay? Well, that changed really quickly, and everybody loves it. Zillow, we were talking about the hits on websites. Zillow rules, they bought Trulia, by the way, about almost a year ago now. And between the two of them, as a single entity now, they're getting 240 million individual hits every month. 240 million. And people are a little bit freaked out on that in the brokerage industry Because you have to realize, what do we have, 330, 340 million people in the US? Those are US heads. So essentially, everybody other than the kids are showing up and checking out the homes and the estimates and everything else they offer there. So when you do find that market niche, and you do offer, you figure out their biggest problem, and you come up with a solution better than what anybody else is offering, you're off and rolling, okay? Now, they attacked most of the US. For us, small business, we've got to make our niche as small as we can possibly control, okay? The second statement from him, Mr. Thiel, conventional beliefs only ever come to appear arbitrary and wrong in retrospect. Whenever one collapses, we call it a bubble. And if the internet works pretty well, actually this one, I've got this link on, this isn't even an internet link. 2000 to, actually 2001 probably, through about 2006, what was going on in the economy, in the stock market, in real estate. Anybody remember?
Up to 2006?
Yes.
So it was booming.
It was booming. It was really out of control. Okay? And 6 years before that, in the very late 90s, and I know you're not going to believe it, so I brought a little bit of proof. I anticipated the real estate downturn. I've been in real estate for about 30 years. I actually took and printed myself, I don't remember if it was 10,000 or 20,000, slick 8-page pamphlets and had them inserted into the Denver Business Journal, saying that I thought within a year the real estate market was going to begin crashing and values would actually go down. You don't want to know what happens when you make a contrarian statement like that. My phone went off the hook. It was just ringing. And everybody let me know I was an idiot. Because remember, we're in the middle of a just explosive bubble, okay? And I simply explained why I stated that. And actually, I showed it in 8 pages on there. And we'll see if this pops open. I used to, whoops. Oh, that's right, Roger gave me this little guy. I still have to click the, so I'm going to open up. This is actually a PDF of the original document, and I won't drag you through it at all. Just the first paragraph, and yes, that's a stick figure. You don't have to make super fancy stuff to impress people when you're saying something they really don't want to hear. This came out at the beginning. Again, I don't remember if it was 10 or 20,000. It was a huge pallet or two I had delivered directly from the printer to the Denver Business Journal. They insert them and deliver them with all their stuff, so it was really pretty fun. This is how I began. Metro Denver real estate prices are artificially inflated due to record low interest rates. Sound familiar ever? Zero down loan programs, sellers paying closing costs on behalf of buyers, interest-only loans. Because of the underlying weakness in the market from the economic downturn from 2001 through 2003, we did have a little bit of a bubble there through the dot-com period, if you remember that. You can remember that Super Bowl from the year 2000. It was dominated by dot-com companies, seeing who could spend the most money. They all went out of business.
Like in '99 or so, when that the subprime mortgage thing started to like just expand greatly.
Oh yeah, and a lot of that.
Like made prices inflate because the credit for mortgage was so much easier.
It was yeah. Anybody could get a loan. Yeah, it was just a disaster, and you could see it coming because at the time, from the late '90s, from about '98 to '99, I figured it was going to crash, and I started getting involved with the banks because when things really crash, banks take back properties through foreclosure. It's called REO, real estate owned, and actually that was my specialty for a dozen years. I got in early before anybody expected it to go down. In fact, just as a little comment, side comment, everybody that knew me at that time, aside from the folks that responded harshly to this 8-page pamphlet, said I was an idiot. I mean, that's what happens when you take the contrarian view, But that's almost what you have to do in business. You have to anticipate, and you just got to have the guts to make the move. And they said I was an idiot. And 6 years later, the same people would say things like, boy, you really fell into that. You're one lucky guy. Yeah. They forget really quickly. But anyway, downturn, we had a little bit of a bubble from 2001 through 3, just from the internet bubble, the dot-com bubble. And repercussions, the artificially inflated prices caused by the incentives introduced in the market since 2002. So exactly, they were getting everyone that possibly could. The government's role was to get ownership up past a certain level it had never been before. And they succeeded. Albeit temporarily.
At any cost.
Yeah, they succeeded. This is where I got things wrong. I said that it would begin somewhere around the third quarter 2006, which it actually did. It began around then, but folks did not realize the depth of it until about 2008. And I misguessed the fact that we were going to take down the entire globe. That was way over my head. I saw Metro Denver. I did not see the global crisis. I'll be perfectly honest there. So I said it would last for about 36 months, and instead it lasted about 7 years. It was a little harsh. So I guess what I'm saying on this whole thing, let me close this up. I won't make you guys suffer through the whole gig. But I just was responding to his comment, this idea of a contrarian truth. Conventional beliefs only ever come to appear arbitrary and wrong in retrospect. Nobody believed that was going to happen until after it happened. And then you had the entire federal government on panic alert. It was almost, Russia sending nukes kind of responses out there. Okay. Let me use Roger's little gadget here. And again, the reason I was able to do that, and the reason I was able to specialize in that particular little market niche, and that's a tough niche. I ended up with clients like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the biggest underwriters on the planet, and maybe 1 out of 1,000 brokers that apply for that job get it. It's not really a job. You're just supplying a service to them. You have to anticipate what's going to happen in the market, and you have to go after a particular defined niche and understand what their problems are going to be. And I pretty much knew what they were going to be before they did. And it's a hard job. It's not like it came easy. When you take on stuff for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, you're the broker, you're the manager of the property, you're the general contractor, you cover all their bills. There was a time where Premier Asset Services, which was the REO unit for Wells Fargo, owed me $600,000 in expenses I covered for them. Okay, so it's not life is easy, but it's the only chance you have. You have to go after a segment, okay? Every startup is small at the start. Peter Thiel. I don't think he got his book edited quite as well as he should. It was a great book, though. Zero to One. Peter Thiel.
I should read it again.
It's a good book, and again, anything from Seth Godin is very good too for marketing. Every monopoly, the definition of a monopoly is that it dominates a large share of whatever industry it's in, whatever market it's in. So what he says again, and we see this repeating over and over, every startup has to start with a very small market. You can't analyze your data and figure out what that market's biggest problem is until you start with that tiny market. Okay, we're going to see this over and over. And I just wanted to get us started before we start talking about smashing data. You can't just smash data. You can't go to the computer and ask it what market you should go to and what their problem is. That requires human brains. But you can then, once you ask the right questions, you can create the algorithms to pull the information out of that data that you can then use to solve their problem. Okay? And again, the most successful companies make the core progression from a tiny niche and then eventually grow to a large, ideally, international status. Facebook. Peter Thiel was on the board of directors for Facebook as one of the initial investors. And, he reminds us in the book, and I don't remember which college it was, if it was Harvard or whichever one. Facebook started at a school. That's where it started. It didn't start with a globe and 1 billion users, okay? So, he learned and figured out what these students wanted, and then he grew from there. Problems and desires. Now, I'm going to go ahead and go a little bit into my stuff. This is still Seth. Remarkable marketing, and I'm going to define marketing differently than what you're thinking right now, is the art of building things worth noticing right into your product. Marketing, almost immediately, what'd you think of? TV commercials, advertising, magazines, banner ads, right? That's advertising. That's one-way communication of the company telling the market what they have to benefit that marketplace. What Seth Godin states, and what I completely believe, and my entire gigantic project is based on this, is you understand your market's needs, their pain point, what they need fixed so well that you build that completely into your entire product, your service, your system, your website, everything you do. And it becomes the marketing. The product, the service itself becomes the marketing. It's not the advertising, it's the actual benefit to the user that becomes the marketing. So, whenever you guys do an internet search, where do you go? Google, right? At one point they didn't exist. Remember, there were search engines before Google, right? Yeah. It's a true story. It's hard to believe. And there's still other search engines, but nobody goes there, right? They came out with a system that gave up better results than what anybody else could do, okay? And they work on that algorithm all day long, 7 days a week. They're perpetually improving it, right? That's the marketing. It gives you exactly what you want, okay? And in fact, before I came in, I was playing on my phone a little bit, and because it's a Microsoft phone, it comes automatically with Bing. And the difference in the results between Bing and Google is amazing. It's just amazing. Google has 3 times the depth of information on almost anything. That's the marketing, okay? Don't think of marketing as advertising. Think of marketing. You understand your niche so well that you build your service or product to meet their needs so much better than everyone else that it becomes what they talk about, what they tell their friends, and they don't want to use anything else. And it's hard to do. It's really, really hard to do. But if you don't, then you have to spend a ton of money advertising and essentially lying, if that makes sense. You're telling them what you want them to believe, but if they really believed it, they would be going there already. So Bing can sing and dance all they want, but we still go to Google. That's.
So you're kind of saying use your product as a marketing platform here?
Your product or your service is your marketing. Yeah, Seth Godin, what he'll tell you in his book, and just Purple Cow is the easiest one for you guys to grab, and it'll make perfect sense to you as you read it. You build such a good product. You put, instead of spending $10 million on advertising, spend your $10 million up front in making such a superior product or service that the marketplace will want to seek you out. Once they have a taste of what this does for them, they don't see other people's commercials. Does that make sense?
It's like buzz, like the product sells itself. Or
Right.
people, word of mouth, which carries a lot of weight.
It carries all the weight.
Yeah.
It really does, okay? But we're going to talk when we get a little bit further. I needed to get you guys to understand that you can't just start with attacking data. And don't buy data lists. And, because everybody on the planet wants to sell you a list of data. I don't care what business you're in. They'll sell you schools and stores and you name it, demographics. They love that. Demographics, I hate demographics. That's where age, income, nationality, all that kind of stuff, that's not how people buy stuff. That's not how their desires are filled. And so you can't just run out there and snag data. Define your market, define what their needs are, and then figure out how you want to meet those needs better than anyone else, and then go digging for data. And we'll touch on that in specifics. We're going to run through some fun quotes, and then we're going to go into the heavy stuff. Anybody got a guess who this might be? These are just going to be some fun business quotes.
Steve Jobs?
Coco Chanel. Okay, she's an interesting
Should've gave us
person.
a hint.
Well, you'll figure some out. But she's a very interesting person. She came from complete poverty. Did you know that? She was abandoned by her parents, left in one of those places where you leave kids. Yeah. And she ended up being, one of the epic people of fashion. And that was her business strategy. In order to be irreplaceable, one must always be different. And we've just touched on that. Understand what your market's pain point is. Offer them something that relieves that better than anything else out there. And I think in her mind that would be irreplaceable and different. Quit or be exceptional. Average is for losers. That's pretty harsh. That's not what you hear at most of your little sales meetings. That's my friend, Seth Godin. And he's also got he's got a lot of books. You can't really go wrong with any of them, but in one of the really small books, he calls The Dip. In business, you get going, and then he draws this little picture of a big old divot. And essentially what he says there is, it is really hard. It's going to be harder than what you ever imagined. I can vouch for that. I can tell you right now, whatever project your little heart desires, whatever business, it is going to take you 3 times as long as you ever imagined, and it's going to cost you 5 times more than anybody ever did to do the work. I can tell you that from harsh experience. And what he says in there is that dip, if you can get through that, if it's worth it to you to get through that, and it's going to be torture, if it's worth it to you, that's what creates scarcity. Scarcity creates value. What that says, it's weeding out 95% of everybody who tries it. That's what it comes down to. It's not that I'm so smart, it's that I stay with problems longer. Same kind of idea. That's my friend, Mr. Einstein. Okay? There's so many quotes of him simply saying that in one way or the other. He's like, I'm not a genius. It's just I lock onto something and I won't quit. And that's what it comes down to in business too. Convinced about half of what separates successful entrepreneurs from the non-successful is pure perseverance. Same concept. That's Mr. Jobs. And I hope this one's true. I hope this one's true. In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. Again, Mr. Einstein. Anybody want to take a guess on that one? That's how I start every day. It's somebody that's currently worth $11 billion. That's my friend, Mr. Elon Musk. In 2008, that was his quote from around 2008, he was simultaneously trying to launch Tesla, SpaceX, and going through a divorce. He was working 20 hours a day. He had pretty close every penny he had gotten out of, I'm gonna bring this up. PayPal, somewhere between $300 and $400 million tied up and blown through to get Tesla and SpaceX trying to roll. Neither one were rolling at that point. And both were simultaneously, literally, 2 to 3 weeks from complete bankruptcy. Rumors had it he was spending time with his buddy Sergey Brin, Google, one of the founders of Google, trying to get him to buy one or other of the companies if he couldn't come up with the money and the means to survive. So this is a guy that we think is one of the smartest guys around, both scientifically and business-wise. Again, currently worth $11 billion. This is how he felt, okay? We all go through it. Imagine if he'd given up. Tesla's a pretty cool car. I'll never know, but 120 grand, but I understand it was at 5.2 seconds, 0 to 60. It's
Our other board members, Roberto's usually here, he's got one.
oh, right.
His wife's got the money she brought her.
All right. But can you imagine? I mean, this guy is now running stuff up to the space station more than anybody else. And everybody wants one of those Teslas. And think about that alone. How long has Ford and GM and Chrysler tried to come up with an electric car? They've been trying for 20, 30 years. They come up with crap. This guy shows up out of nowhere and creates an industry. And you can only imagine, my understanding is he can take and get a spaceship with cargo up to the space station and back for about 10 to 20%, or 10 to 20% of total what the other bidders do. So he might do it for 50 million. Everybody else would have to have, $1 billion to accomplish it. It's just amazing. It's just amazing. Mr. Thiel, Peter Thiel, he says that every startup is based on secrets, something that nobody else is thinking about, or if they are, they're not doing anything about. And we talked about that contrarian view concept, and I really like that. I have a lot of fun with that. I write for you can't call them newspapers anymore. An internet news service called Inman. That's the largest one in the industry I'm in, real estate. And I love to take the contrarian view on almost everything. Not just to get people to say bad things to me, which they do. Because when you take the contrarian view, they will attack you. They're just vicious. But because it's true. And I expect these things to happen. And we're going to go ahead and get into the data stuff pretty quick. This is from Mr. Thiel. Every one of today's most famous and familiar ideas was once unknown and unexpected. So the contrarian question, he says, we need to ask is, what important truth do very few people agree with you on? What is it that you believe, particularly in business, I would hope? What do you believe that almost nobody would agree with you on in business? Have any brave souls? I'll give you mine. Yeah, and I've been involved with real estate in one aspect or another for, I guess it's 29 years, I guess. I ran up the REO business for about 12 years and did pretty well. But like every cycle, that ended. And now we're back through a, quote, boom cycle. I can't explain it. The economy's not that good. Pay's been flat for 22 years based on government inflation rates, which we know is not true, right? They claim 2%. Yeah, go down to Home Depot, go to King Soopers, right? Go buy a house. Think how much that's gone up. Houses have gone up like 500% in those 30 years. Pay didn't go up 500%. It's dead even based on 2% interest or inflation rate. my secret, if you will, and this is where all my data comes from. Again, I first figured out my niche, and then I figured out a big problem in that niche. How do you value a home? Square foot? Location? Your built, okay? Appraisers, real estate brokers, the entire secondary market, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, banks, stock market, investors, they all value it the same way. Start with a location, okay? Square foot size, bedroom count, bathroom count, basement finish, year of construction, garage spaces. They think that's where value lies. The entire industry, the entire supporting industry. Then you got some idiot like me who tries to figure out how that works. And about 8 years ago, back when REO was still quite, in fact, it was just really getting going, I knew it would eventually stop, because every cycle does. Boom, bust, about every 12 years. That's just the way it works. Knowing I would have to go back and do real estate again, instead of the bank loan stuff, it's a whole different atmosphere, it's completely different. I tried to figure out how Zillow, who was new to the market then, was creating an automated valuation model, AVM, essentially telling me what the value of your house was with algorithms automatically with no human intervention. And so what I did is I would pull up a series of homes, sold data, 6, 12 months worth, for a particular neighborhood, okay? And I would control for most of those factors. I would control, make sure the location's the same. I would control for time, 6 to 12 months. And I would control for the style of the house and the square footage plus or minus 20%, because that's what appraisers do, it's what brokers do, it's what bankers do. I plugged that information, those basic 8 criteria, into an Excel spreadsheet. And then I created another column that said price per square foot, okay? So now we're not talking big data yet, we're talking little baby data, right? But you have to start with a concept. So I visualized there's going to be this big correlation between these 8 factors, or if you will, independent variables, and price per square foot value. Guess what? I spent too much staring at data on all these different areas. I tried, cheap houses, expensive houses, up north, down south, downtown, it doesn't matter. What you find is I couldn't find any correlation. Sometimes the house with the most bedrooms sold for the most, sometimes the house with the smallest number. Square foot, same thing. Bath, same thing. Year of construction, same thing. I couldn't find correlation. I spent months there thinking I'm stupid, because the entire industry runs on this. So eventually I could get a hold of literally a math PhD, and I said, I want you to run a multiple regression on these criteria and tell me which ones correlate to value. In other words, which ones have the highest impact to value. Guess what he came back with? There's no consistent correlation with any of your criteria. And so here I am staring at this idea going, I want to create an AVM like Zillow, because I know what Zillow does. They pull county record data. What can you get from county record? Barely those 8 criteria. That's all you get. So I know that's what they're using. So I'm busy. We're selling hundreds of homes a year. And finally, that starts slowing down. And about 4 years ago, I get back on this hardcore. I grab oh, by the way, this world is different. It is so cool. 10 years ago, all the stuff that I do now, I could have never done. I've got people working on stuff all over this globe. I've learned about countries I hardly knew existed. I Skype with them live every week. And I've got people in Armenia. Anybody know where that is? That's where my GIS guy is, Geographical Information guy. He does all these polygons and shapes for me. I've got a PhD down on the East Coast. I've got 2 people up in Canada. I've got somebody over in London. And of course, several folks in India. That's where most of the world's programming seems to happen. opportunity. You can do it. You can do it. Now I got myself off. I got myself off a little bit. Okay, so I hired a data scientist. These are the guys that are big data crunchers. Okay, I said, here's my problem. I want you to run a regression on this stuff. Guess what he comes back with? No correlation. So I'm staring at all this data, and this is where you have to define your market niche. We've got buyers and sellers, and that's pretty much the entire market for real estate, right? What do sellers want to know?
How much they can get for their house?
What's my house worth? Okay? What's the buyer want to do?
How cheap can they do it?
Pardon me?
How cheap can they do it?
Well, they may try to get that, but what do they really want to do? They want to find the coolest house that they envision for themselves, right? So how do you do that? How do you value a house if all of the physical criteria everybody in the industry uses doesn't work?
You wait for the market to crash and then you buy a house.
No, you have to value this. You want to automatically value a property, and everything the industry uses to value properties does not correlate to value. What do you do? Well, what I did is I stared at data. Okay? Big data sounds wonderful. It sounds like magic. It sounds like artificial intelligence. It sounds like recommendation engines. And it gets there, but you don't get to start there. So what I did is I pulled thousands of sold properties, and specifically I looked at the text descriptions of those homes. Because if the physical characteristics don't create the value, something in there is. Okay? And this is where my secret gets expanded a little bit more. And you have to bear with me. This is what machines can't do. Okay? This is what humans have to do. And I won't compare myself to Einstein. This is what Einstein was doing when he visualized black holes and supernovas and all this stuff that we can't comprehend, right? I stared at thousands of descriptions of homes, and all of a sudden, days, weeks, months into it, I see a pattern, okay? And so then I start exploring this pattern, and essentially what I'm getting at is I created this theory that people buy a home based on how well it relates to their anticipated future life. In other words, somebody gets married or somebody wants to buy a house or whatever they're going to do, they're envisioning their future. They might think kids, they might think Christmas trees, they might think barbecues, big turkey dinners, whatever they're thinking. And the house that has the most of these characteristics, these attributes, these qualities that trigger them to think these events is what creates value to them, right? Because you can take what we found, mostly me, is in any neighborhood, you're going to see, if you control for size and location and the style and all that stuff, you'll see a spread from low to high, price per square foot, of 30 to 300%. Something like Wash Park, if you're familiar with that at all. You've got a few tiny bungalows still there, and you've got some mansions that somebody scraped and built there. Well, that creates a huge variance in values, right? Based on what people want, what they desire. And that's why we talk about desires and what the marketplace wants. And if I'm losing you guys, stop me and I'll be happy to explain it. So then I've got this problem. I want to value houses based on the benefits buyers receive from these things that trigger them to envision life events that have not happened yet. Do you see how hairy this gets really quick? This is me. I'm not a statistician. I am not a data scientist. I am not a programmer. I'm a marketing guy, going back to the original concept of marketing to better meet the needs of a market than what the competition does. That's all I am. But now I've got this big hairy thing. I am trying to quantify things that haven't happened yet, because that's what buyers do. If you're going to create an AVM for the marketplace, you have to emulate how the marketplace values homes. That's where data comes in. I've now got a strategy, a theory. I've got my niche, whether it's a buyer or seller. And we can narrow this down. I'm going to show you how tiny it can get. They have a specific need. I want to know how much my house is instantly, because everybody wants instant. I want to find my perfect house, what makes me happy based on things that haven't even happened. Yeah. Okay. So what I did is it required pulling all of the data. Well, what it really did, you have to control for location. First thing I did was control for location, because that's one of our most important criteria. What that involved was creating a series of what they call shape files or polygons. You can think of them as a neighborhood. It's a computer-generated perimeter around a neighborhood, if you will. It's actually a lot more precise than a neighborhood for very specific reasons, the one I won't mention. But to give you some idea of how specific it is, for Metro Denver, I've created 13,000 polygons. Zillow has about 140. It requires that kind of precision because you can, I'm sure you guys can think of this. You're in a neighborhood. You go to the other side of the street. You're in one neighborhood on one side of Sheridan. You go to the other side of Sheridan. This side is $500,000 homes. This side is $100,000 condos. Okay? Completely different market. The problem is most folks that are bashing this big data don't think that deeply on it. They just merge all this into one big pool, and then they're going to run these certain regressions, big data crunching. Pull a lot of data together, they run regressions, they try to figure out what's important and what correlates to value. But you can't mix neighborhoods. You can't do it. It doesn't work, and I'll show you why. Let's say you've got a $1 million house in Wash Park. This thing's got 42-inch cherry cabinets. It's got slab granite in the kitchen. The new appliances, some kind of a black colored appliance. Not the old black, the new black. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about. It's like a stainless steel black. Right. It's replacing stainless, right? So it's got all this stuff. Over here in Wash Park West, our first one's right on the park. This one over here is the other side of the territory. We've got an old bungalow with the exact same cabinets and the exact same counters and the exact same appliances. Based on my theory, how's that going to affect the value of each?
The one on the park should be worth more.
But how much does these amenities, these qualities, contribute to the value versus the value over the cheaper ones? This is where you have to pull psychology. This is what big data can't do. So what happens, the guy that's buying $1 million house walks in, they glance up, and they see those cabinets in the counter. What's he think? No, he thinks I deserve it. I'm spending $1 million. If you had anything less, I'd tell you to take a hike. A different guy walks into the $300,000 house in Wash Park West, 12 blocks over. He sees that stuff in there, and what's he think? No, he's thinking, holy crap, when my wife sees this, I'm going to be living on Easy Street for the next decade. Because the emotional benefit is so much higher. He didn't expect to see that high of a quality deal. It's a cool location, not quite as cool as the other one, but it's 1/3 the price. And so it makes a huge impact. So what has to happen is you can't sit around. That's what brokers used to do all day long. They would sit there and try to figure out what those things did to the impact of value. Now, they didn't do it on the official appraisal form because it doesn't even show up on the appraisal form because nobody used it in value. But it was going on in their head, and they were making these little subjective changes. And so that's where the data crunching comes in. So what I have to do, control for location, and I collect up a bunch of data. I don't try to do 3 houses like most appraisers. I want them all. I want 18 months of sold data, because what that does is it gives me that range, that 30% or 300% range. So now I know exactly what houses got the most money, and by using some fancy text analysis, I can pull out all these characteristics, these qualities. We have to do a special process called tokenizing, which means adding a number to them so the computer can read them, because the computer doesn't know what a slab granite is. It knows what 1, 1, 2, 3, 5 is. And it then pulls all this data in, and it runs it through a system called random forest regression. You guys won't need to really remember that. It's a kind of regression that essentially it's like a 1,000 decision trees, if you will, run simultaneously. So what it does is it's clicking on off against all these different criteria all at once, if you will. It happens in like a partial second, but it's determining what caused the house to sell for more than another house that didn't have that stuff. Does that make sense?
And that is in a certain shaped area that you predetermined.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's automated because drawing 13,000 polygons, I started hand drawing them, that's a bad idea.
So you just arbitrarily, it wasn't really truly arbitrarily, you had to decide where the borders
Exactly where.
of each neighborhood should start and stop.
Exactly.
But there must be some anomalies in there that's kind of
There-
strange lot.
Absolutely. Denver sometimes run down in fingers on you and everything, and it does cause a lot of trouble. And it's not easy. Remember Mr. Musk's comment? Feeling like a pile of, right? You get to feel like that often because the more you dig and the deeper you get, and every time you think you've made a breakthrough, there's about 6 more things that blow up on you, and you have to go back and fix them. You know, there's a term, data, garbage in, garbage out. The data we get from the brokers. I'm a broker, I'm allowed to get it. It's the MLS data. If you guys saw how bad that information is, half my money was spent cleaning their data. It's terrible. It's bad data. And brokers do not know what makes a house sell. If you saw the descriptions, I'll see $3 million Cherry Hills Village houses for sale. And it'll say something stupid like, the most incredible house ever. And that's what it says. That's your description. Tell me why it's incredible. Tell me about the antique woodwork. Tell me about the marble tile. They don't. They don't even understand that that is what people want to buy. That is what makes the difference in value. That's big data crunching. Define your market, and by defining it, I'm going all the way down to that polygon shape, okay, that shape file, that tiny thing we're going to call a neighborhood. Did you invite the Harley guys? Nah, it's not a Harley. Sounds like a Yamaha there.
It's a scooter without.
But I'm getting my market down so tiny that I can do stuff for that market that nobody else can do. And that's what you're up against in this business world nowadays. If you're not Google and you're not Zillow, that's what you have to do, is something that nobody else is doing, something completely different and meets the needs of that marketplace like nobody else has done. That's what I'm up against. Now, if you can value a house based on those qualities, for sellers, guess what you can do for buyers? To me, this is even cooler. They're buying a house, why? Because there's specific qualities that trigger them to envision future life events. And they're feeling those benefits when they walk into that house. But before they walk in, everybody's on the internet. Every house buyer is on the internet now. Okay? What do they want to do? They just want to find their perfect house, what they think is their perfect house, right? They scroll around, there's a bunch of junk, they hate most of what they see. Eventually they click on something they think, that is so cool. I don't care what they think is cool. I don't care if they think it's a Victorian, right, is cool. I don't care if it's one of these factory loft things, right? 20-foot ceilings, concrete walls, and steel beams. I don't care what they think is cool. What we now can do through this big data crunching, if you will, is all they have to do is, if you will, point or touch a button. And with the
homes and.
It is, because what'll happen, and I won't drag you guys through the spreadsheets, I got a lot of stuff, you don't want, I just got a few of them, if the email went through. Again, I'll find a spread within that tight polygon, controlling for the same size and style of houses, plus or minus 20%, like the appraiser. I'll find a 30 to 300% difference in price per square foot for a house that a computer would otherwise see as equal, based on its physical attributes. So the difference in value between that 30 and 300% are those qualities and how well they meet the needs of that market niche. That's why I have to control for the location, because just like we talked about with the cherry cabinets and the slab granite, the $1 million guy, he expected it. He was hoping for better. The 300 grand guy in Wash Park West, he's excited as heck. There is no set value to these qualities. The qualities, the value comes from whatever the marketplace paid for them. That's what we're doing. We're using data to extract what the market says they're worth to them. And that's got to be done in a tiny, tiny niche we're going to call a neighborhood or a polygon shaped file. Does that make sense?
That's the context. I mean,
Yeah.
like if I was looking at $5 million houses in a ritzy area.
You were?
Well,
No, I'm
yeah,
not going to pay you that.
But I mean, a pool is the norm, building hot tubs the norm, probably home theaters the norm. I mean, that's
Right.
like everybody's got them, so
Right.
it kind of factors out as a consistent, right?
Right. Well, what happens is its impact per dollar value goes down. So, you know, that hot tub, if everybody's got one in a 500 grand neighborhood, they make very little impact toward value, very
Because it's
little
not
correlation.
differentiated.
But if all of a sudden I show up over there and find a little 100 grand house on East Colfax, I'm like, hot tub, I'll buy it, right? It makes a huger impact based on what they expect their life to be like, which is a crazy concept. That's my secret. That crazy concept is what my entire data mashing, entire concept, entire website, the whole gig is all based on that concept. That's my little secret. And then where are we at on time? Am I over now?
You're fine, it's just 8:11.
Okay, so we started a little bit late. I'm gonna run real quick for you guys. If you want, I can stop. Because I've given you really the main stuff. This is the, oh, baby, load. This is the regression we ran to essentially prove those 8 parameters. And these are just hundreds of pages. Each one of these pages is a separate polygon. You can think of it as a neighborhood. And you may or may not be able to read that. It's not too bad. Those are the 8 criteria we talked about. Square foot, bedrooms, bathrooms, all that kind of stuff. What's important to note is how these are completely inconsistent. This is telling you graphically what was important in this neighborhood on a price per square foot basis. In this particular neighborhood, strangely enough, lot square foot correlated very highly to value. Next neighborhood, it was bedrooms. Lot had very little impact. Next one, bedrooms, bathrooms, square feet, and the garage spaces. Lot, almost zero. This is at least, here's lot, huge again. So what I'm saying is, that's the secret. The whole industry, right, I'm going to try to explain this to these guys that are billionaires, is wrong. You can't value a property based on these 8 attributes. That's not how the buyers value them. So why should the market? You can't. And that's what this little graphic's all about. There's hundreds of pages. You don't need to look at them all. But just watching that whole thing jump around, anybody should be able to figure this out.
There's no correlation that you found, outside the house, besides the lot?
Well, I mean, location's already controlled for. So when you're pulling all of your data from a single polygon or neighborhood, if you will, you already control for what's going on outside of it. Now, we do control through the text analysis, the big data crunching, right? If it's adjacent or backs to green space, open space, parks, whatever. into a little bit of garbage in, garbage out. You're not gonna get a broker with terms that say, this
That's
house,
the highway.
yeah, this house sucks, and here's why. They won't ever say that. So you do struggle with that a little bit. That's one of those things that make you feel like a pile of whatever, right? Because you gotta keep dealing with this stuff. And it's hard to do, but you run into that all the time. Now,
So that's when the buyers, that, you know, they see it, and they look out back window, and.
yeah, oh, it's gonna hurt you, absolutely.
Great house,
It will hurt you, absolutely, and that will throw off the AVM. However, we have one criteria, me. I think of my big global crew as we, because I couldn't do it without them whatsoever. It's my stupid ideas, it's their programming skills. There are certain terms I look for that I interpret, and now the system interprets as negative. Even though the brokers aren't gonna say my house sucks, what they're gonna say is something like tenant. What that means is it's a rental. What that means is somebody hasn't been really taking care of it as well as they could have, okay? Or if they say something like great bones, brokers like to say that stupid
It's
stuff.
the frame still.
What is that telling me? They don't have anything concrete, specific, good to say, so they're winging it. So I tell the system, right, because big data, computers don't go, oh, great bones, holy shit. No, you have to say, great bones, that's token 15632, and that's bad, okay? And then you have to let random forest regression pull that in and go, oh, yeah, that thing correlates to the lower priced properties in the neighborhood, okay? It's not as easy as everybody thinks. Trust me, artificial intelligence, which is the idea of the computer thinking, really doesn't exist very much right now. What it does exist as, at least in my industry, but not very much, is what they call recommendation engines. And that's what the buyer tool does. That's when they say, I like this house. I don't know why, I just like everything about it. It's got concrete floors, it's got concrete ceiling, it's got stainless steel counters, and it's got steel beams. It's an old factory converted to a loft. I like it. You don't have to tell me why. Push the little button, and I'll go find the rest of them like it. And it'll save you weeks of drudging through all those other houses. That's what you consider an artificial intelligence, specifically a recommendation engine. Here's some stuff. And what's kind of cool is if you save a house in your account at the website, the system does that for you every day. If you save it because you think it's cool, it's going to search every day for stuff like that, and it'll tell you about it. And so, again, the data.
Yeah, I was thinking of something like, the tokens are individual things, like granite counter and cherry cabinets, da-da-da-da. Is there a way to account for, like, how that's all put together, like, how everything matches or is arranged? Because, you know, you can have the same tokens, but two things look very different.
Right.
One's way better than the other.
You won't get it perfect, but the system, if you will, has been trained. I'm the trainer, which means I picked out the terms and I applied token numbers to them. It will look for things that no other AVM looks for. Things like the term open floor plan, flowing, vaulted, 14-foot ceilings. It will look for all that stuff that nobody else's thing will look for. But again, big data is not magic data. You have to tell the system what to do. It'll then do it. That's wonderful. If you got 1,000 people in there wanting it done, I could never do that. But first you have to tell it what to do, and that's a lot of work. But first, you have to figure out what the biggest problem is that needs solved. But first, you have to describe and define your niche. That's why I drug you guys through that at the beginning. You have to start with a specific market and whatever their problem is and solve it. You can't just say, Mr. Computer, what is the biggest problem out there? And what should I do? It doesn't know. Data is stupid. It does not know. And real quickly, and this will be the last little gig. So what this looks like is this huge, complicated 134-page patent with addenda coming. Zillow's is like 29 pages.
I was gonna ask, do you think there's gonna be any formal backlash, like, obviously, this system, once it, it's gonna improve and get good, and maybe ABM's gonna be like, the bank will say, that's our appraisal, right, for mortgages.
I don't know that you want to, I don't know if you want to rely 100% on that value, because there's still going to be variance.
But would it ever, I mean, it's gonna knock the appraisal career.
Well, it's not the appraiser so much, because the bank's always going to want to have somebody to double check.
Yeah, I guess verify.
What it's going to knock on are the brokers. Remember, I'm a broker, been there forever. I don't like brokers. They think they sell houses. The house sells the house. The qualities of the house and how well they relate to the desires of that niche marketplace sells the house. So what's going to happen are these kind of systems, whether it's from me or somebody else, are going to start replacing more and more. Think about right now. 10 years ago, 60% of all homes purchased were found by brokers for buyers, and about 6% were on the internet. Today, 43% of buyers find the actual home they purchase all by themselves on the internet, and only 33% are found by brokers. It's a complete inversion, okay?
So why do you need a broker anymore?
You're getting there.
Yeah.
There is going to be a change in this market.
Because my wife and I bought our house about 11 years ago, almost,
Right.
and I remodeled the whole thing, but
Okay.
back then, there was a broker that she dealt with.
Yeah.
Drive around and look at houses.
Right.
Money was cheap, so they, we pre-qualify for,
Yeah.
this house. I don't want that house, I want this house.
Yeah.
Ooh, let me show you this, I don't want that house, I want this house.
Right.
So,
Well, the internet gets smarter all the time, and so you're absolutely right. There's some other stuff as far as business strategy and marketing, if you will. We're going to really quick touch on it, and I won't hold you guys up, but disruptive technology. You have sustaining technology, you have disruptive technology. Sustaining technology is essentially what Zillow would like to do. They got a big chunk of the market. Zillow and Trulia control about 67% of all real estate search on the entire internet. 240 unique searches a month. 240 million unique searches per month, just on Zillow.
But
It's,
they put every house on it, I mean,
No, they
everything that's not for sale.
well, they will value every house, yes, absolutely.
And then the data's on it, like you can just plug in any old address and you'll get a house.
Yes,
It might not be
absolutely.
for sale, but
And you couldn't do that before.
Right,
You couldn't do it when he was looking for a house.
right.
Zillow didn't exist yet.
and they have no clue, I remodeled the whole thing, so.
Well, no, it's just Zillow didn't exist yet. You couldn't do that. Now you can. There's a big chunk of what the broker used to do. It's been automated.
But what are they thinking when they're putting on every single house that's even not for sale? Is it just to get the data?
They're just valuing it. The algorithm, because of the data they use, which is county records, it's available. You can buy it.
So they just figure it's easier to just put every piece of real estate
Well,
on
that's
it.
actual data though, because if you got a lot of houses that are for sale, it just means it's targeting your house.
But they put every house on it for sale or not.
Right. Well, why? What's the first thing you're gonna do as a
For me,
potential
it's
seller?
like a searcher, it's useful, I still like to see the information.
Oh, people love it.
Yeah.
You get to zoom in, you can stare at your neighbor's roof and her backyard, and you can see what Zillow thinks it's worth. And then you go over and look at your house and go, it's worth 30 grand more. I was told there you sucked, right? They love it. That's why. Because what's gonna happen when you think about getting ready to sell your house? A year or 10 years later? You're gonna think, well, I gotta go check out Zillow. And guess what? Zillow says, brokers, if you want the business, you owe us 35% of what you make. Okay, and that's essentially what it's getting down to. It's a huge business.
So Zillow's charging the brokers?
Yes, They have not gone to a complete referral system. Referral system would say, if you earn 10 grand in commission, you gotta give us 3 grand, right? What they're doing is they're saying, if you would like your little face, because brokers like their faces, especially their old high school faces, even if they're 90 years old. If you want your face next to every house in this neighborhood, you gotta pay us an open bid system. So you gotta beat out every other broker that would like to have their face next to every house in this neighborhood, okay? Some of these brokers are dropping 5 to 10 grand a month
Yeah,
to have their
it's
face
like
on
one
Zillow.
Like in a certain area, right?
Right, absolutely. And so then people look at it and go, oh, well, that dude's got 19 stars. He must be good. And then you get the business. And that's where Zillow's profit center is. Yet, they're not turning a complete profit. But they're making a lot of money. Now I'm completely back off topic. Where did I leave off? You guys got me running there for a minute.
Oh, you were starting this.
Yeah, this really quick. I'll just run through, and so, yes, this is, as Roger said, sustaining versus disruptive technology. What happens is the disruptive technology 10 years ago was Zillow. No brokerage had ever considered putting up an AVM, automated valuation model, on the internet because they're scared. Just like you said, why do you need a broker? Okay? And so Zillow came in, disrupted the status quo, disrupted the method that everybody was using, and they become top dog. There is not a real estate franchise that can touch them. The closest franchise Zillow has with Trulia, in actual percentage terms, their relative market share is about 67%, but they actually own about 37% of total everything. The problem is you have millions, you have a couple million websites, real estate. 99% of them don't rate. They just don't show up. Nobody ever goes there, ever. So you can discount those away. Those are just junk. They don't exist. There's only 7 real estate sites out of those 7 million, and they own pretty much 100% of the real estate market.
What are those 7 sites then?
Zillow plus Trulia are number 1 because they're now one entity, and they hold, and this is an article I wrote for Inman, in fact, I don't think it's been published yet, I don't know, about 67% of that relative market share of those top 7. Let's see, the next one down is Realtor.com, and I believe they're at 10.5%.
So all of a sudden, it's way.
Yeah, it's a very fast drop. The next one is Redfin, and they just moved up to 2.8%. The next one is Homes.com. They're 0.1% down, 2.7%. And then there's a couple more, I can't even think what they are, but they're not brokerage sites. So out of the top 7, the only brokerage-related sites, Redfin at 2.8%, and they just can't touch Zillow. Nobody's going to touch them. Realtor.com, even though it has that moniker, it's a private company. It's owned by Move, which was recently bought a year ago by News Corp, and they paid $1 billion for it. The rest of the sites don't exist. They get so little traffic, they're non-existent on the internet. Millions of them. No matter how much they spend. In fact, you know what? We'll just glance really quick. So the way this thing works, and I don't remember, I just wanted to show you guys. You take this hairy, complex, nasty system, and believe me, you've just heard like 2% of what I actually have to do, just to grasp the concept. And what you have to do to meet the needs of your market. What one did I decide was good? Oh yeah, up by Rogers area, country club. I figured I would hone in on Rogers stuff.
You got a country club by where you live?
No, that's a neighborhood. I think the average price is about $5
No,
million.
that's by Cherry Creek, that's on First and
No,
Downing, right?
Let's see, yeah, it's up right here. This is the general area here. We'll zoom in. I just wanted to show you, so what you need to do to make, see if this is the house I was thinking for Roger. Yeah, about 5.5 million, is that the one I was thinking? Cedar, yeah. So what you have to do then, is you have this huge, unbelievable model. I mean, you don't even want to know what it takes to get this far. And you have to give your market something fast, instant, and easy, intuitive. And so what we do is we just have them on the map, we give them a description, if they want to click through really quick for details. And this website is in alpha mode, and our internet's slow enough the pictures don't want to load. Pictures take a lot of bandwidth, and when you're on a slow internet connection, they don't like to load. Let me go back to see if they'll go. You have to take and shut up. The market does not care how hard this was. They don't care it took me 5 years. They don't care about any of that. They care about one thing. Are you fixing my need? And if you do that, you have to do it simple and intuitive. And we'll see if the pictures will pull up. If not, it's just cool with pictures because people are very visual and they can quickly see what it is that what they like. This is the Find More button. And essentially what it does is it beam up, Scotty. And it takes all these turns here in this really nice house. And if you click this, it's going to search for other homes very much like it. And it's going to have some of that same cool stuff. And again, it's a pretty good match. It's right about the same price, $5 million. Right, Roger's budget. And that's how we do that. And I wish you could see the pictures because that makes all the impact. Because I checked these ahead of time, and they're all these palatial spreads. And what's neat, here they start coming in. And what's neat is the computer did this for them. It found these matching, what was that my first one? These matching palatial spreads on behalf of the buyer based on them clicking one button, because I like that house. It's pretty cool stuff. And it's not perfect. And then really quick, I'll show you just how the value works, because this is what differentiates. And again, it all comes back to, it's not just big data. It's understanding the market's needs and doing it better than somebody else. Ideally, everybody else.
You had to put in the MLS ID of the house?
Sure. Where I'm different than
Are
Zillow.
you accessing their database?
Oh, I suck it raw twice a day. We suck it down into our server. We've got, oh my gosh, it's so big. We got millions of pictures and stuff on the server. So what happens is not only, Zillow, what they do is they give you a single number, and they say, here you go. That's what your house is worth. But if you read the small print and you click a link, it says, well, this is what your house is worth, but it's actually somewhere in this spread. So they might say 300 grand, but they might say, well, it's somewhere between 175 and 500. And it's based on a statistical ratio of error. And they say it's in there. Because they're basing everything on those physical attributes. What I get to do is I can say, well, here's what your house is worth according to our algorithm. And what I do is I say, the green stuff is what you have in common with this price range. And we match it up exactly what they got. And the orange is what's different between you and this house. Okay? And this is where a little bit of garbage in, garbage out gets me in trouble, because if the brokers put in sucky descriptions like, yeah, it's $2 million, but it's the coolest house in the neighborhood, and that's all they say. If sellers knew how much that was hurting them, those bad descriptions, they would fire the broker, but they never see it. Well, what's neat is what's going to happen. Sellers don't trust brokers. If you say your house is worth $1 million, they're going to say, it's like 1.2. I think you're wrong, right? So they comply. Well, look at the higher price range. There you go. That's what the buyers got at the higher price range, okay? And you can look at pretty pictures. You can compare the pictures right across the board. Oh, this one's got, look at this, man, it's got that stamped concrete, that stamped concrete, 10,000 square foot driveway. Now the half million, maybe $1 million is right there. And so they can play. And they can go down here, and they'll never go down there, and see what a 500 grand house gets them in the same neighborhood. We'll have to see if the pictures load. And so what's cool is the seller not only gets an estimate of value,
But they can go back to the broker and say, no, my house is worth more than what you're telling me.
Well-
You just want a quick sale.
no, what it's doing is it's teaching them. The other automatic valuation models don't teach them. They say, here's your number, and here's your spread. What I'm saying is, here's our guess. You don't like it? Play around. See what the buyer's got at different price points. And you get to see in text and pictures, except they don't load tonight.
It tells you like you
There you
can
go.
add a feature and increase the.
Yeah, it tells you what the features were, what the buyer's got at this price point, based on real life sales. And so when you think back to those little correlation models, those little graphics going up and down, this is doing this to the 10th power. This is taking a look at everything, comparing it directly to the house you're valuing, and comparing it to different price points in that neighborhood. And it's explaining, right, because you can see the spread in values. Remember I said 30 to 300%? So my lowest price point's 5.5. My upper price point's 1.8. You got a 300% spread in that neighborhood. Why? You got a bunch of custom homes. And some guys only had $500,000 and some guys had $2 million. And that's what they wanted. And so that's the idea of big data. That's what you can do. This is the kind of stuff that a broker is never going to take the time to do. So once you get the system set up, it's cool.
So you won't need a broker anymore.
Well, I won't say that, but what I'll say is so much more of what the broker theoretically used to do can and will be automated. And what that means is the broker should be doing much less work. What that means is the broker's going to earn less money. You're going to save more money.
I remember 11 years ago, the broker was telling me one price on our house, it was remodeled. And I had two friends that were real estate appraisers. They pulled comps, they told me what it was worth, and I came back, told them about it, oh no, you can't sell it for that. I says, that's what we're gonna sell it for. And, it sold within 2.5 months, there's 50 showings, and he says, I've never sold a house for that much before, in that neighborhood. And I said, well, that's because it's been remodeled. But if I
Right.
would've went with him, I would've lost out on about 30 grand,
But see,
So-
with your remodeling it, what you did is you pulled yourself up with higher qualities, more of what the buyers really desired. They were visualizing those turkey dinners, right? That's what created the spread.
I was thinking that the broker just wanted a quick sale, he just puts it on.
Well, yeah, it's
on the
easier
list, makes
for
it
them to
2.5%,
sell a cheaper place.
and, it sells in a week, and he's smiling, very little work.
Right. And they're going to be doing less. And again, I'm a broker. I can say these things. They're going to be doing less and less work. The price is going to come down. There's not going to be 6% commissions.
What are they now, about 6% or?
You know what? I think average across the nation is somewhere between 5.5 gross, buyer-seller side combined. I literally,
This summer, it was 5, so they're dropping
It's
a
about
bit.
2.5 on either side.
but I honestly think that within 3 years, the automation of the systems quite literally should bring that down to about 3% gross. And
Wasn't it about 7 for a long time?
yeah, but see, you have to understand the move, what's happened in the last 20 years. Until 15 years ago, MLS data, all sale data, all broker data was in a lockbox. Nobody had access but the brokers. That creates a semi-monopoly position. That drives prices up.
I remember you need a broker, they'd have that MLS book. Remember,
Right.
It was a white covered book, like a phone book, and they
Right.
guarded it with their life.
Right, the big confidential thing. And those were hideous. Those gave you about that much space for a house. You had one really bad mimeographed picture
Yeah.
and a price, bedroom, bath, square foot, and all that stuff that doesn't create value. That's what they had. I know, I was there. I was there when the first computer thing showed up. And what we'd have to do is we got on the phone. I think it was touch tone. I don't think it was rotary. And you would touch tone in some number, and when it started screeching, you'd slam it into a thing that looks like a pair of suction cups, and then that same junk would come out on a roll of paper, right? That
Cool, man.
that wasn't that long ago, you guys. That wasn't that long ago, right? 15 years ago is when the first IDX, Internet Data Exchange, information hit the market. That's when brokers, for the first time, were allowed to publish information about homes for sale on the internet. 5 years later, Zillow showed up and kicked their teeth in because they met the needs of the market better, and nobody has ever caught them since then.
Well, you still go find a house you want, and you go to the bank, say, this is the house I want, and then they want you to get a, what? They want you to get an appraisal.
Sure. And I don't think that's going to...
I think this stuff will get so good after a while, they can get the appraisals off of that.
Well, automated valuation systems are not perfect. They are not perfect. Mine, just to give you an idea, with Zillow is about 8% median error rate. What that means is half the time their valuations are within 8% of what the house sells for. Half the time, they're not.
So they're really within a 16% window.
No, you have to be careful. Half the time they're within 8, half the time they're not. That not could be up to 50 or 100% off. It's just they're not within 8%, the other half, right? So you got to be careful of that. They're not saying average, they're saying median on purpose.
But if you say you're within, I could be 8% below or 8% above.
Right. And if that is correct, you're usually pretty safe, because what's going to happen, let's say you're a for sale by owner. What happens if you put your house on the market 8% below market rate? You're going to have 3 offers. That's what's going to happen. And if you overprice it by 15%, what's going to happen? You won't have 3 offers. And you'll go, oh, I got to come down. So what? You'll be okay. You won't die. It'll be all right. So I don't think this will replace, but I think that this is going to substantially pull away from the type of work that the brokers have been doing. And I'm not the only guy, I'm sure, thinking about this stuff. But this is the concept of big data. You figure out what a niche needs, and you provide something better than what everybody else is doing. And once you figure that out, you can use your data to automate it. But data is not going to figure it out for you. The data can't say, this is what you need to do. But once you get it figured out, then you can start working at it. And then the way the sustaining versus disruptive technology works, your sustaining technology is what everybody's doing right now. Zillow has got their AVM, and they're not messing with it. They're happy. They got lots of people coming. So what's finally happened after a decade, a few more people are starting to add AVMs that want to compete with them, right? But they're using the same concept overall, right? And then what happens is some moron like me shows up with something that maybe isn't perfect, but it's offering some cool new benefits. And so it starts off as a tiny niche, and it just keeps swimming upstream until it collides with the big market, and all of a sudden somebody goes, well, that's kind of cool because it's telling me why it guessed my value there. That's the secret. You need to learn. You want the seller to know why. I don't want to have to go in and say, you got the orange carpet, you got the lime green walls, you got the particle board cabinets, you got the plywood down there for the counter. I don't want to have to say that. Your house sucks. I'll let the computer say that. And if they don't believe it, throw it on the market high. The marketplace will tell you, because the marketplace has told me through this system where it all comes from. That's it. I'm going to let you guys go, man, if you have some questions.
Yeah, when's the next market crash?
I'm going to start studying that because I will start studying that over the next year. I have been so busy on this stuff. This stuff has been really hard. It's been a hard last 4 years. And I think I had plenty of time because the market really didn't even start recovering fully until the last 2 years. So just based on that, we should have at least, assuming Iran doesn't launch a nuclear bomb over to Israel, right? We should have at least 4 to 6 years before things tube. It just depends. We just haven't had that huge of a growth. The last 2 years have been real hot in Denver, but I think we're still 4 to 6 years from the absolute peak, assuming nothing major happens. Russia takes over one too many small country and we got to get involved, or there's extraneous things that I can't predict, but just economic cycle wise, it should be 4 to 6 years before we peak out.
That property values have gone up about 91% in the last 10 years. Is that fairly accurate?
No.
I didn't think.
No. First of all, be really careful of anything that's aggregated or averaged. Case Shiller, I don't know his first name, Schiller. He got the Nobel Prize in economics in the last 2 years based on his index. And all he does is track the values of properties in metro areas. It's like pretty simple to do with big data. But he uses an aggregate average for the entire metro area. Now we know if we go over to Wash Park, they might have gone up 50%. And we go over to Montbello, and they may not have gone up at all. I don't know, right? So the aggregate average stuff is horrific. Don't trust it. But even using that, because I actually have it. I don't know if you guys want to see it. I can find it that fast. Let me end this thing.
Because where I live, property values have gone up in southeast Denver.
Well, what's odd about it is like, because I was watching a lot of properties online, and it was the first of this year, things just took off like gangbusters.
So property values were climbing.
Yeah, like everything, I mean, probably from the first of the year until like March, everything jumped up 50,000, just like instant that I was looking at, like.
Because you moved into the neighborhood?
Yeah. No, but I was looking at like, say an average 3-bedroom, 2-bath, brick ranch, 2-car garage, pretty much middle of the road. And this thing, I was looking at them, well, probably in late 12 and through 13, and like in so shape, not great, but needed updating. They were running in the low 200s. And like by March of 15, that same house was like 260, 270. Boom. Just like that.
Well, part of that is, I don't know if you guys remember me saying that scarcity creates value. We are in a bizarre real estate market in Metro Denver.
Well, part of me thinks some of that has to do with the legalization of marijuana. And a lot of people
Who knows? But
because commercial property's gone way up.
yeah, I understand warehouse
Building for
stuff has gotten out of control.
business, and supposedly his property values just
Well, and then
went up
they're
41%.
building apartments and condos like that.
Right, well, that's because there's so little housing. See, normally in Metro Denver, right, the general 6-7 county Metro Denver, through the history of real estate, we've had plus or minus 20,000 properties available for sale at any one time, single family and condo combined. As of today, we've got about 4,100. We're operating at about 20% of our normal market capacity. There are no houses for sale.
You said normally there's 41,000.
No, 20,000.
No, I mean initially, there was about 40,000 for sale.
No, it's 4,100 currently. 4,100 as of today.
As of today.
Normally, in a normal, healthy market, Metro Denver, for the history of my being around, has had 20,000 typically available for purchase. 1/5. So you are operating in some bizarre conditions. You have, you know what, part of it, and it was so funny because, and this is my analysis, actually, Roger would have received this, keeps telling me he didn't get his emails, but you asked me about the values, and what I had to do is convert some data. You guys, you'll have to do one of those Men in Black mind things.
Yeah.
Because this is the new stuff. it's too complex. This is just step one of 99. So in the year 2000, that's all the further back I really cared to go. What I had to do is we didn't have enough sold data in the MLS stuff. We only had enough to go back 5 years. So I borrowed this Case-Shiller index, even though I hate aggregate average data. And he had undefined factors, and what I had to do is convert that to a percentage change per year, and then I had to create an aggregate average change, and then I had to create a factor for the programmers. So essentially, what happened is the year 2000, values went up about 11%, 2001 under 4, 2002 1.5, 2003 hardly mentionable, 2004 hardly mentionable 05. Oh, here comes 06. Went down a little under 2% there. Went down almost 5. Went down about 3. So the average, in fact, we can do that right here. Although I don't have the stuff for the last 5 years because we use that off the MLS. Let's see. Equals I can tell you what it did for those 11 years though.
So you were just looking at the index for its changes.
Right. So during that period, it went up about 15% total. But you have to remember, it wasn't like this. It was, and then back up. And that doesn't include the last 5 years because we'll be pulling that directly from the MLS. But that is that dangerous average aggregate Case-Shiller stuff for the whole Metro Denver. So you would have neighborhoods that went up 50%. You do have neighborhoods that went up 5%, right? So I hate that stuff, but when you don't have data going back far enough, you create systems. And you don't even want to know how long it took me to do these 4 columns. It was 2 days trying to figure out how to extrapolate values forward and backwards for that. It was crazy. But since you asked. What else can I tell you guys before I let you get out of here?
No, this is interesting. I thought that blanket term when it says property values have gone up 91% in the last 10 years, I thought that was just.
That's, if you think about it logically, it's almost impossible.
Yes.
Because in that hot period there, between 99 and 2000 there, it went up, 14% one year and whatever it was, 7, 11. And then it started going flat, and then it went down, about 11 to 20% over a period of years. And then it went back up. So if you think about it,
I don't
it just.
know where the news got their data, but I heard that and I thought, I don't
Well,
believe
you
it.
can make data say anything.
Right, you don't know where they got that, and they could have been using, who knows, whatever
Different
bad.
areas, some might have gone up more than others, so.
Absolutely, it's absolutely going to be the truth. It's.
But really, you're not, purely economically, you're not going up at all. The dollar's devaluing that much. Because I see the house has consistent value.
Yes, but money
Even
is,
the way the dollar is,
money
it's got a
is
value
what
to
it used to be.
society.
No, not at all. In fact, and I don't have the stats with me on this, but I read the magazine The Economist, and they essentially showed that in the last 22 years, based on the 2 to 3% inflation rate, the government claims that income has been flat for the last 22 to 23 years.
Right.
In that same time period, although they don't even include this in their inflation rate, housing overall has gone up at least 300% over that period. Groceries, right? Home Depot, right? Cars, you can hardly buy a decent new car for below 30 grand, right? It's crazy. And so you have to really know your stuff. You can't trust what you hear necessarily. And in fact, the advice that these Seth Godin and Peter Thiel give, you take it all with a grain of salt. You really do. You need to look at what these smart guys say, but you can't always believe them. You have to take it in, based on what you want to accomplish. Even my data scientist, I pay him a lot of money. And he should be a whole lot smarter than me. But I still catch him making mistakes. You know, just that analysis you saw there, there's a whole bunch of more complex steps. But to pull a value of, what that was for, it was to pull a value of a house forward anytime between the year 2000 and 2009 to 2010 value, and then I'd have to take another step to pull it forward again. Right, Roger? Make sure you get that all in the pad. But,
I got it.
but to do that, you know, he thought that per the polygon, all I'd have to do is multiply the size of the house times the square foot of the current average value of the polygon. And he almost had me talked into it because he's smarter than me, but I realized he's wrong because you can't, because what I have to do is I have to look at what the market paid per square foot for that house in that year. And I showed him exactly if they paid $300 a square foot, and I pull it up to today's standard and it says $250 a square foot, the average, it can't be. We have not lost 15% in value in that time period. And so what I have to do is I have to take the percentage change between the average this year and the current average. Then I take the actual value per square foot the market paid and bring that forward by that percentage. So don't believe everything you're told. Don't believe it. People make stuff up. I made all this stuff up. I'm serious. None of this stuff existed. I made this stuff up. I'm hoping it works. All right, guys. Well, thanks.
Well, thank you.
Sure. Roger, you want to shut me down?